So last season, the Raiders traded away two of their best players. They traded away Khalil Mack, defensive end, and they traded away one of their wide receivers, Amari Cooper. Two of the best players on their roster, I might add, too. These were seismic moves for the Raiders franchise. And according to the Raiders left tackle, Donald Penn, the moves took a toll on their roster. They really, really hurt morale in their locker room. Especially the Khalil Mack trade. The Khalil Mack trade really, really seemed to have an impact on the Raiders locker room. His new team, the Chicago Bears, gave him a massive contract. They signed him to a 6-year deal worth $141 million. That's the most of any defensive player ever in NFL history. And what's even, to make things worse, week 1 and 2, right after that new contract and right after the trade, against the Packers and against the Seahawks, Khalil Mack dominated. I understand how it looks like that trade was really, really bad for the Raiders. They got rid of a really good player. Khalil Mack went to the Bears. He killed it. They made the playoffs. They had a better season than before. Despite the perception, though, I actually believe that trade was really, really good for the Raiders. Getting rid of Khalil Mack, I think, helped the Raiders long term. I know it's weird, but you look at the spot the Raiders are in right now. Things are going well. They have right about $70 million of cap space. They're one of the top teams in the NFL with cap space to work with and to add players and to sign players in the 2019 offseason. And in the next 2 NFL drafts, the Raiders have 5 first-round draft picks. They're in good shape. They have a lot of money to spend, and they're going to bring in a lot of young new players to their franchise. And I will acknowledge the Raiders went 4-12 in 2018. Last year, the Raiders went 4-12. But I don't know how much Khalil Mack would have really helped them. You know, the Raiders had Khalil Mack. Would they have suddenly made the playoffs? Would he have really put the Raiders over the edge? I don't think so. I don't know that Khalil Mack would have had a massive impact on the Raiders last year. And now, what's worth noting, too, is in 2017, even with Khalil Mack, the Raiders went 6-10. So losing Khalil Mack, what that did was Khalil Mack swung 2 games. You have Khalil Mack, you won 6 games. You lose Khalil Mack, you only win 4. How big of an impact did he really have on the Raiders franchise? In fact, Khalil Mack, you can argue, had a far greater impact on the Chicago Bears, who were in far better position to use Khalil Mack. The Bears already had a really good defense. Then you add Khalil Mack, and you're even better. You're a playoff team. But also, let's acknowledge, so the Bears went 12-4 in 2018, and the year prior, in 2017, the Bears were only 5-11. So you could say, well, Khalil Mack, yeah, he made the difference. Khalil Mack won them 7 more games, but that's not really the case. Khalil Mack didn't win the Bears 7 games. Their new head coach, Matt Nagy, helping their quarterback, helped them win 7 games. I'll give the Bears 2 games, right? Maybe Khalil Mack has the difference of 2 games for the Bears. He put them over the top against the Dolphins. No, they lost to the Dolphins. See, that's my point. Here's the thing. I don't know that adding Khalil Mack would have really made a huge impact on the Raiders. It helped the Bears more than it would have the Raiders. And if the Raiders had had Khalil Mack, they wouldn't have been much better. And I actually think having Khalil Mack would have hurt the Raiders long term. Let's look at the position the Raiders are in right now. They have 5 draft picks in the next 2, 5 first-round draft picks in the next 2 NFL drafts, and they have a bunch of free cap room, a bunch of room to sign new players. If they'd kept Khalil Mack, they would have far less cap space, and they would have had a marginal season. They would have gone, 6-10, 7-9. They'd have a middle-of-the-road draft pick, like they'd be picking 14th, and they wouldn't have 5 new draft picks in the next 2 rounds, in the next 2 drafts. Having 5 first-round draft picks is a massive, massive advantage. I think they have 3 first-round draft picks just this season. So getting rid of Amari Cooper, getting rid of Khalil Mack, both of those moves really, really helped the Raiders right now. 2 players or 5 players. Young players, a bunch of second-round picks, first-round picks. I believe getting rid of Khalil Mack actually helped the Raiders long term. It opened up a lot of cap space, and it gave them a lot of players they can add to their roster in the future. One defensive end is not enough to build a playoff roster. 5 first-round draft picks, that just might. And so I think getting rid of Khalil Mack ultimately was the right decision by the Raiders for the long-term viability of their franchise. I know it hurts. I know it's ugly. It's hard to watch Khalil Mack be really successful with the Bears. But long-term, and with hindsight, that move was the right move for the Raiders. I will say, too, if the Raiders had been really close, like if the Raiders had just missed the playoffs, then you could criticize trading Khalil Mack all you want. But they weren't even close. They were a bad team. A bad team with one more good player doesn't make you suddenly a great team. Not a defensive end. A defensive end doesn't put you over the edge. Von Miller and Bradley Chubb are a prime example of 2 fantastic defensive ends that still could not make a difference for their franchises with the Denver Broncos. I don't see it. If the Raiders had been close and they didn't make it, you could criticize the Khalil Mack trade all you want. But they weren't even close. And I really don't believe Khalil Mack would have made a huge impact and really helped the Raiders long term. Oh, I hate doing this. It makes me feel uncomfortable. I really don't like self-promotion. It makes me feel like a used car salesman. But I got to do it. So if you don't know, this is my podcast, Strong Opinion Sports. It's my favorite thing in the world. And you can subscribe on iTunes, SoundCloud. You can find it on YouTube. You can find the full entire hour-long podcast on YouTube. You can also find shorter breakout clips like the one you just watched. Please do me a favor. If you like anything I had to say, maybe you hate me and you're mad about something, share this podcast with your friends. Share it on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever you want to do. Help me grow by telling your friends about this show.